Okay, well, I'm not sure that's what we're updating you on, but we are. I did have a meeting with the select board around the master plan, and which includes obviously some housing. And I have a timeline to give you, which I think was misunderstood by both the Provincetown Independent and a lot of people on Facebook. So I just wanted to clarify that, you know, we are not starting housing development in 2035. You know, that's never been, that was not what I was talking about these. And I also said that we would do a full update for the select board on housing, one element of the plan. That actually, you know, as you know, the community housing plan has many more pieces than are in the master plan.
Right.
On October 7th. So at the select board meeting on October 7th, we're going to give a full update of both programs, new ideas for programs, and where we are with all of the more minor, smaller housing initiatives. And I think we're still on for that. We've been working on the presentation, and I think it looks pretty sure that it's going to be the 7th, and we're not putting it off for another 2 weeks. But so take a look at the timeline, and you can see it's tremendously confusing because we are working on, you know, Route 6 infrastructure, tea time and town center plaza development, wastewater. So there are a lot of elements to it. And so I did my best to do a master timeline and then to do a shorter version of this. But I thought I'd give you the longer version with more detail, and you can. And I tried to highlight, you know, where we are now as opposed to when this started and when hopefully it will be mostly complete.
One question I had, we sort of talked about this a little bit yesterday at the strategic planning committee, but deferred it to today because it's more appropriate time for discussion. Is it, assuming that the wastewater planning is done in 2025, right? That doesn't mean the construction, but the planning. I was wondering if the RFP for the housing could be moved up sooner than 2027. The RFP is contingent on decisions about wastewater, but if they're being made in 2025.
Yes, absolutely. And I think 2027, I was just thinking, you know, to buy us a little time because we have to actually have a system to connect to, right? So, and I know that Wellfleet's project got delayed because they did not have the approval for wastewater. So I know it's really important to the funding sources to have a plan. So yeah, we could do it right away and try and engage a developer, but it would be contingent on knowing that they're not going to get hooked up until 2029.
Right.
Yeah.
But knowing that the RFP process, then the review and approval process and selection process at the early stages will take years, the sooner we can move it forward. Once we're certain of what wastewater will look like, and so we can say to the developers in the RFP, this is what the plan is, and this is what you would be connecting to. Once we're certain enough that that's 90% true, I would think it would be prudent to move as rapidly as possible on the RFP. And because
I don't think we have any objection to that. And I don't think, although that's been pointed out to me on the timeline before, I think we had talked about if we know whether we have the road or not, and we get the study from Stan Tech and we feel confident, then we could just go ahead and do it early.
okay, that's good to know.
I mean, I think we would need to have some public process before we go out because, you know, we haven't discussed it in terms of the number of units and all that stuff in a while. So we probably have to do some of that, but.
Well, I think you've been doing some financial modeling.
That's the Stan Tech thing.
Okay, all right. When does that do that?
They're just finishing up the report now, so we're going over draft report.
And what will be the process with that? Will that go to the select board?
Yes,
Do you have any idea when that might be? Will that be part of that October 7th meeting?
it could be, could be.
Okay, well, that'd be good.
Um. Yeah, and again, we're just trying to put some of those mystery pieces together.
Mhm.
Before. The other thing I am doing, is meeting with Hillary next week to talk about if we don't get wastewater approved, then what can we and can't we do on both of those sites?
Right.
And, is there a way to do like a package treatment plant that might be able to be used by both sites? I don't know. So I'm starting that process too. So hopefully if we get to town meeting, whether we have wastewater on or not, there'll be we always try and have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have more information about what can and can't be done. As I know Stratford had proposed it, but that was in the very preliminary discussion period, so I don't know how real that was or not.
Yeah, and technology's probably even since between then and now has even changed, so.
Technology has changed, the regulation, the DEP regulations have changed, more importantly, so.
Right.
But just so you know, we're moving forward with both plans, with wastewater, without wastewater, what can we do? Because we're not gonna wait forever, obviously, if wastewater doesn't get approved and we are putting it off for more than a year, then, it probably is prudent to try and do something without maybe ruining the whole parcel for other uses though, but.
Is the wastewater approval you're concerned about, is it at the town meeting or the DEP level?
Town meeting, DEP is fine with us, we've been moving forward with
Okay,
them.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's the money.
So sorry, Jackie, DEP is, I know in from a real estate standpoint, they're not leaning on us, and we don't seem to be in as much of a sensitive area as some of the other communities, but they're not leaning on us to have a plan that will preclude them from implementing the rules about IA systems for everybody, so.
We already, so it's a dual process. So we're working on the wastewater plan, which would be a treatment center and a collection system to
Right.
meet our nitrogen reduction goals,
Right.
right? But we're also working on with Orleans and Wellfleet on the watershed plan that will protect us for 5 years. And we have that.
Okay,
So that's in place, with Orleans and with Wellfleet. So we're good. So we've done that, but this is more the plan that we are proposing is now going through permitting. And so we're meeting with DEP and they're, like they've asked us to do some more groundwater analysis tests, and that's where we are. We can't design it until they accept the site and they want more testing on the site. So we're going back and forth with that right now.
Okay. That's good. It's good to hear that there's a possibility of moving it
Yeah.
forward.
And the other things that we're the other construction-y things that we're gonna discuss at the October 7th meeting is 580 Massasoit. We have the go-ahead to renovate the exterior, right? And now we're talking about, should we, while we're opening up that envelope and doing the construction, should we try and plow ahead and do that 3rd floor and get the extra unit? So talking about that.
Right.
We're talking about, we have preliminary plans for the beach plum across the street. They're really adorable. It would give us 4 units of housing. And we need to discuss that, moving forward with that with the select board. Do they want to move forward with it now? Do they want it to be workforce? Would they prefer it to be, affordable? What do they want to do with that design? Because we do have a design and a cost estimate. We have 25% design, so we'd have to pay for the rest of the design and then the construction.
So it's 4 units, 1 bedroom?
4 units, 2 studios, 2 1-bedrooms.
Okay. And from a workforce versus capital A affordable housing, is it a matter of the funding?
Yes,
Because would you be looking to the trust to fund any of the capital A part of that?
If, yes, if we decided, if they decide that they want it to be capital A, because when we purchased Beach Plum, originally, we talked about it being workforce housing,
Right,
so not income,
right. Is that something, I mean, we're talking about if we need to do any requests to the CPC this year. Would we want to put in a placeholder application for, say, maybe 2 of the units being capital A or all 4, I don't know.
Yeah, I
what,
mean, that's
and then-
absolutely possible, yes.
Because we'd have to start to work on that now.
Yeah.
They're due next month. We don't know, we can at any point withdraw the application if you decide, the select board decides they want it all workforce, but.
And the reason we didn't ask for the 3rd floor at 580 was because it is an extra expense and we didn't have the money for that too. But that we've always considered those 2 units should be affordable. So we may want to ask the trust for that funding gap as well. So,
Which would be a collaborative, historic and.
yes. Affordable housing.
Right.
project.
For the 3rd floor.
Yeah.
Do we have enough information to do a placeholder application for that in terms of cost?
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay,
What I'm now checking with is can our architect get the plans for the 3rd floor done in time? That's our biggie, to go out to bid.
right,
So that's the big question mark right now.
right. The bid would.
Or to add to our cost estimate as well, so we know what to request.
Right, the bids would need to be completed. I'll think through the timeline, but we could do the placeholder application. And proof of concept. And then the final numbers would have to be done before it's approved, which would be in January or February.
Yeah, so if she could get the design
Is that right?
updated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we could get the design updated by sometime in November, say. Which is a short timeline, but they do have most of it, like they designed most of it, they didn't finish that piece because we stopped them. Then we would go out to bid immediately, like we're working on the specifications now for the rest of it, so we would be able to go out to bid immediately, so that would, if you allow 6 weeks for that, that would bring us into January.
Okay,
Allowing 2 weeks for the holiday, like the end of January.
and I would imagine you'd have enough information to do a placeholder amount.
Yeah,
It just wouldn't be the exact amount, right? What do you have any idea what that is? If you had to guess,
What we have now is,
740.
right for the historic piece, but there was a total.
Of 1.4, 1.5,
5.
1.4 and so 7.
And for the Beach Plum project, back to the napkin guess on that, you said we have a ballpark, but.
They gave us an estimate of 2 million, but I'm thinking, by the time we go out, we'd add a good 500,000 to that, so 2.5 million for 4 units.
All in, or does that include the acquisition costs, or?
No,
So, not to go off the reservation too much here, but, I mean. That is a staggering amount of money for effectively 4 bedrooms of housing.
Mhm.
So just going on record. We could have handed out 6 $400,000 grants or 12 $200,000 grants. To people to buy down single family homes. And have a stake in their property and deed restrict them, and there would be a huge pool of interest for that, and. Being in the business, the difference between, a $650,000 home and a $450,000 home. That's the difference between our couples that live here being able to afford and not being able to afford. So just food for thought going forward.
well, Jeff, I think it's not too late. What we have across the street is a design. It's something drawn on paper. It's
Right,
not even an advanced design with engineering.
right,
So if we wanted to say, we're gonna just take out those units or leave them there for the next 5 years until we decide what we want to do with the property. And we've got the house rented, so we could easily do that and switch to that model if we could figure out legally how to do that.
Yeah, we would, obviously, there's research
Again, these are
involved.
the kinds of ideas
Yeah,
that
well,
we need
yeah,
to
there's,
talk.
there's certainly ample precedence around the, around the state and the country, but
Yeah.
it just seems like I'm always a fan of giving the homeowner a stake in their property and a horse in the race, and it also eliminates the ongoing maintenance costs for the town, so.
But it is a one-time, I think it's, the idea of it being expensive per unit, it's staggering, of course it is, but it's forever. So if you again, we run into this all the time, if we let people buy a house, or we need to do both, right? So
Right.
we need to have some buyer options, and we need to have some in perpetuity rentals, because really
Yeah,
rentals are our worst problem.
right, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a portfolio of rentals, but, in terms of the in perpetuity, there's plenty of people that would be happy to buy a home that's deed restricted, that they would only realize so much in terms of the return on it. Usually it's, indexed to cost of living or something like that. And in terms of when they're no longer either in need of it or they move or whatever, they would turn it over to another qualified family. So it's probably doesn't provide the same ironclad guarantee that the town owning housing and rental
Right.
housing does, but there are ways to restrict those properties so that, they could, going forward, be held to that use.
For a certain period of time.
Well, I think that's what
Could you
this
give perpetuity?
committee perhaps really needs to consider. I think one of the things that's coming really clear is even in a higher density townhome cluster development, the cost per unit
Still,
is $500,000 to $600,000.
Right.
And so, when we say $1.5 million
Two.
for,
She said
580.
2.5.
we're
Yeah.
talking for about 580.
580.
And, in my mind, at 500,000 is the historic first floor,
Right.
then 500 for the second floor and 500 for the third floor. That's right in line with it being $500,000 per unit.
Mhm.
2 million for 4 units. So, if it's $2 million, that's $500,000 a unit, so it's the cost of, it's in line with the cost of development, even with a high density multi-family, multi-unit development. So to your point, Jeff, I think, do you pursue that avenue? Or do you pursue a smaller and perhaps slower growth avenue of individual unit acquisition at a similar, maybe lower cost, right?
and what I'm hearing, I'm being criticized, the town's being criticized for not doing anything now. So there are a couple of things we can do now. And that's, one of the options that the select board will have to mull. The other thing is I just gave Rachel an update. I asked CDP for an update on the affordable deed restrictions program that they were, because they did this huge study on it and the last presentation was April. So I just wanted to know where we are with that. And they say they'll have that report by the end of September. So that may also give us the deed restriction angle.
Right, and
Is that the
unfortunately,
lease to locals program? That's
sorry?
the lease to locals program?
No,
No,
that's
that's a different.
This
right.
is the Indeed program. that
Yes.
CDP was researching whether or not it would be viable here.
Any early? I mean,
They're gonna let us know at the end of September
Okay,
what their
alright.
findings are.
plus we have someone working on the lease to local program, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
When will we hear about that?
October 7th.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, we're met with,
Placemate.
Placemate, it's a company that runs it for Provincetown. And they've developed this across the country in several markets. So we're gonna meet with them again today. I think our next step is, we have a template of what a RFP might look like. So we're gonna try to put that together.
And
And-
that creates little A housing, right?
No, well, hang on. So we'll have to get the RFP together and then, presuming Placemates, the only respondent, because I think that's been the experience so far. They're the only ones really doing this.
Right.
then you engage with them and we use that RFP to execute a contract, but then there's some decision points to be made. A, what's the cost of the contract, which covers basically administrative services, consulting, marketing, outreach, maintaining the website and placing tenants, things like that. And then, that comes back to us as to our decision points. Who do we want to have eligible to participate? What's the amount of the subsidy? How long do we want that subsidy to be? And so it could be at 100% of AMI, or it could be something greater. And that might indicate that we need to have different funding sources. So, but that's something potentially that we could come to the trust to fund a piece of that too.
And that program opens up year-round rentals. So it gives a property owner the concept or the opportunity to get cash to rent to put something in year-round rentals, whether it's affordable or not, to put something in rent to a local person. And we either, give them actual money and then
It's really to
For every year
incentivize
they
them
do
to
it.
change their
Right,
rental,
yeah, no.
perhaps from a short-term rental to a year-round
Yeah,
rental.
I mean, I think we're all familiar with the program.
Yeah, and it looks like Provincetown's had really
Got a
good
lot of success.
success,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
20 in the first few months.
Yeah, and
So-
Nantucket has had success with it as well, but they ran out of money for their program.
And I just had someone call me the other day and say, I have 2 homes, one I live in, one I rent seasonally, but the property taxes are getting high, and if you could give me money to pay the property taxes, then I might think about renting it year round, so that's exactly, who we want to talk to, yeah.
Okay, so we've got,
So we got that idea, we've got the deed restriction idea. Yeah, it's just, I think one of the challenges is gonna be figuring out with the board, with the finance committee, with the town. What financial stream are we gonna use for these? Because we don't wanna do them for 1 year and then give them up, right? So it has to be,
so it sounds like we have, I'm counting up 4 or 5 real viable options.
yes.
We probably can't do, maybe we can't do all of them, maybe we can.
Mhm.
But we need to decide fairly quickly because of the CPC schedule. In terms of what we might be asking. If
I
they're
don't
gonna
think the
be,
CPC is a huge issue myself. I think the order is yeah, give them a placeholder for 580 Massasoit. And we'll have more information on that soon. And then we can revise, if we go out to bid and get a later update on an estimate, we can always change it right up to, prior to town meeting, up to March, March 1st or April, even April or so. And then the other thing is just the setting aside of how money within the CPC is the housing allocation. So for whatever you're not asking for 580, put the rest as they did last year. to housing.
but if we do that. And that goes into the CPC held allocation. We have to go to town meeting in 2026.
Right.
Well,
But if you're asking for 580, I mean,
but I'm thinking these other programs will be ready to go before I hope, before 2026.
Yeah, and what we're trying to
So
do is
why not be
use,
asking for the money?
oh, you have some money now
We have some money now.
for the
but-
lease to perhaps say the lease for locals program. We also have some town appropriate money that could help.
left over from our
Right.
appropriation.
So I think we have enough money to get started on these other things.
Well, I don't want to just get started. I want to make progress.
No, I
So-
mean, I think what he's.
On the pilot year.
Right,
we could fund
Okay, so that's.
so that gives
placement.
us time to go to
Right.
town meeting.
Indeed, we may find that indeed works. And we want to try pilot with that. We've got 580. We want to do something with Beach Plum. I don't know whether we do or not, but if we do.
Well, I think Beach Plum probably comes after 580. I think we do both at the same time.
If we're going to do Beach Plum, rather than wait for the construction costs to go higher next year. I'm just saying, do we need to have a discussion where we put this all on a whiteboard and with costs and timeframes and try and figure it all out?
Yes, and I do think that not to get it, I try not to get ahead of the select board. So I think either on October 7th or right after that, once they give us an idea of, you know, we don't want to do beach plum because that's way too expensive per unit. Or we want to wait and see what the state has for workforce housing incentives in the future, because they may, you know, they may come out with something that we could use for beach plum that doesn't exist today, right? They may do that, or they may say, put it on town meeting. Let's just vote for it and have it be workforce housing, or let's just vote for it and sell the 4 units, you know, whatever they can decide. And I think that's a conversation.
Right, but is there homework? Is there homework that needs to be, that you probably are doing, and I'm just, you know, we're the trust are talking out loud.
Yeah.
Is there homework we need to do beforehand to make a recommendation to the select board? To say, these are all the things that are sort of coming down the pipeline. These are the approximate costs. They could be capital A, little a, workforce, seasonal.
And that's what we're gonna
Let's
try
come up
to,
with a plan.
that's what we're gonna try and do for the 7th.
That's the information, that's the presentation essentially, that's the information to be presented at the 7th.
Okay,
These are all the
So,
things that
The
we're,
discussion and the decision, like Jackie said, it's just.
Okay.
It's kind of a menu of options and depending on how they want to use the funds or.
okay. How do we get to weigh in on that? The trust. Do we get part of the discussion?
absolutely. So I think
On the
either we
7th?
do it on the 7th, or we do it right after the 7th. You know, once the, and I'm sure, oh my God, they want to hear your input.
I would think.
But I also know that we've come into this with a history, and the history of Beach Plum was that they very much wanted it to be workforce housing, so not capital A for it. So how do we do that without spending taxpayer money? So that's, you know, we have to talk about those things.
And with the new bond bill having been passed, you know, we don't know yet what money will be available that we can get for workforce.
Because they do
housing.
have an assignment, but it's not,
It's a,
it's
to be
not,
determined.
yeah.
And
But you're right, I think we come out of the 7th with not maybe decisions made. We come out of the 7th with some kind of hopefully clear consensus of what the trust and the board would like to concentrate on, and how much we can get accomplished immediately. Because the lease to locals is probably our best shot of doing something, you know, very soon. That's the one that we probably could do a pilot this year. So there are also ways to, so we come out of that with some consensus or disagreement, whatever it is, and then we'd set up some meetings to advance those things so that then we could make better decisions on which one we're gonna do now, which one we're gonna do later. If we're gonna do them all now, who's gonna pay for what? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it just, in my mind, it's different. We just have a different approach. I would have that discussion with Rich and the trust and Paul and with us.
Yeah.
Before the 7th, so that on the 7th, there's a clear consensus what the recommendation is, and then let them react to the recommendation. But you're much more experienced at working with the select board than I am, so
I think the issue is, you know, we're here talking to you today to talk about the subject, and we want to give the select board the same courtesy.
Courtesy.
And then. and
But
it
you
has
don't
not-
wanna say,
Yeah.
I think you should do this.
Right,
And then once we've had both of those meetings, then we can kind of get afterwards, meeting of the minds, and you can give your recommendation. Yeah,
Thanks, Rich. That was more eloquent than I said it.
But I think, you know, I appreciate everybody's willingness to want to move forward fast on things. But it's also a, you know, pipeline of a bandwidth of what we have, right, with what we can do. And so in my mind, I think we keep progressing on Beach Plum. I don't see that as an immediate thing when we've got at least the locals and 580.
Right.
And some other things that we're doing. I mean, I just think it's too much.
One-
The CPC only has so much money too.
Right. And one of the options we could do with Beach Plum, which would be the logical next step, is not to ask for 2.5 million, but to ask for enough to finish the architectural plans and engineering plans, so that it would be a real thing that could go out to bid, or a real thing that could be offered as a public-private partnership, or, you know, a more complete.
Right, because we don't need to spend necessarily and own a $2.5 million units. And one of the things we talked, I'm not sure I like this approach, but it's an approach, is we could just ask somebody to build it and they own it with a restriction. They run it, you know, so it doesn't cost us anything other than probably having to subsidize a project, but.
Because the size restriction is relative to the septic.
Yes. Yeah. Bedroom. It's just a bedroom restriction.
Yeah, because of the septic.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we could build 4 1-bedrooms or 1 2-bedroom, and, you know, we could change those dynamics, but the site doesn't allow us to expand beyond what we've expanded. So that's the most they could get with the site that we have under the new zoning is 4 units, 4 bedrooms,
Is it zoning or is it septic?
zoning and septic.
So,
There's a limit.
We have a 7-bedroom septic.
but there's
and how
also
many
a
are in
limit
the house?
To the site coverage.
So we have 5 bedrooms to play with, but we can't fit it on the lot. So we'll have an extra.
Darn that zoning.
But Carol,
Well,
one of the things that we thought about was the house could easily, 10 years from now, the house could be made into a 3-bedroom. There's no reason why, it only has 1 bathroom, but, so that would be a major touching renovation because it's an older house. We don't want to touch it,
No.
right? But we could use the bedroom over there at some point.
Jeff, what were you gonna say?
no, I was just gonna comment that we did spend a lot of time on the, you know, the lot coverage regulations,
Right.
and I was sort of one of the ants at the picnic that said maybe in areas where it was more conducive to higher density, that
yeah.
we should allow these kinds of things. So we've really hamstrung ourselves in terms of what we can do there. And it might make sense to defer the whole thing until wastewater came along, even though it costs more to construct it, knowing that you could put 14 units there and there could be a way to do it. But unfortunately, in light of the zoning constraints that we've imposed on that lot, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
I think the site coverage is the lesser issue. I mean, there's a limit to what you could plausibly put there and have it be acceptable to the neighbors and local.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
it's
yeah.
not that big of a lot.
No,
I
it's
think
not.
maybe 1 more unit realistically to, you know, 'cause we're not gonna be putting like a 3-story structure there and everything like that. I mean, that's how you would maximize the densities going up. So, I mean, I think the site cover, I think we designed it to maximize. But even if it was no restriction, on
Or-
site coverage,
or-
I just don't see us fitting that many more units.
Or
given the
splitting
context.
the house into more units,
Yeah, we could.
but that would be another renovation.
Right. The lease to locals. I know we're not with placemates having discussions, but I think I've read in the paper, Provincetown is spending what, about 15,000 per unit, is that?
Oh, I don't know right off the top of my head what they were.
But I think it was
Sounds
like
about right.
20,000 range.
Okay, 20.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about 580 and the 3rd floor. If that's gonna be 700, would we be better off to put that money into more lease to locals? Up the ante a little bit to make it more attractive? We could
3rd
do,
floor is not 700. 700 is
The gap.
do the whole building. Whole building is $1.5 million. Restoration of the historic downstairs
740.
and making accessible the 2nd floor and making accessible the 3rd.
so how much is it for to make the 3rd floor into an apartment?
That's,
I don't know that we have that specific breakdown, but in my mind, like you said earlier, I'm just doing
1.4 million
half a
divided by
million.
3.
500,000 for each. Each.
Right. Okay, so 500,000.
and
So,
part of those, I'm sorry to interrupt, the part of those the renovations or upgrades to the building, like a sprinkler system and.
Raising the roof so that we can put a dormer.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I get that. So, but that's still my question.
Yeah.
So say if it's 500,000 and we do 20,000 per lease to local. Can't do the math in my head, Rich, how many is 20,000 into 500?
Right, but I
But we get
get where
that
you're
many for
going and I want to do both. But I think where the lease to locals, you'd be paying $20,000 for 1 year's rental,
Right.
okay? And at 580, you'd be paying $500,000 for forever rental.
Right.
So, I know that it sounds like a lot of money, but if we do 78 units on tea time, we're gonna probably have to.
It's still gonna be $500,000 per year.
Yeah, no, I
We're
know.
still gonna have to give a huge amount of money to a developer to
Right.
do that too.
It's
So
the co- it's
we
basically
just
the
have to
cost of
get
doing it.
used to the fact that if people really want this, then we're gonna have to pay for it.
I don't disagree, I'm just, you said we should have a discussion, so I'm just
Yeah.
putting that out there
And I think
as.
we have enough money to do a pilot program. We don't know how many units we'd have money for, but for like a year, for the first year, we definitely have enough funding to do the lease to locals program. And that honestly,
Well, our scale is probably a little bit less, so in my mind, just. At the moment, I'm thinking, without having any much thought or discussion about it with PlaceMate or this group. I'm thinking $10,000 perhaps might be a subsidy for East Tin. Probably not quite as much as Product Stop.
but that would pay all of the property
So
taxes.
if you did
plus
$10,000 and you had 10 participants. $100,000, right?
Right. Right,
Plus the cost of the
plus the
contract.
administration.
But if you add affordable housing trust funds, then we have to do income eligibility. And so it's not just a year-round rental, it's a year-round rental to someone.
Right,
who
I
income-
understand that. Right,
This is all the stuff we've been kicking around, and I think,
It's just
having
like,
to
you know,
realize we have to bring it back to others to, see how they'd like to move forward, how the board would like this. to
Yeah.
move
Yeah,
forward.
but the hope is that with the 100,000 that we spend on 10 potential year-round rentals. That it's gonna be successful and that those those landlords are gonna continue to do this year
Right.
after year, but there's no guarantee to that. So,
and there's not enough experience in Provincetown yet to see if that's what's happened at the
Right.
end.
right,
It's like our RAP program.
Right.
We do 3 years and hopefully that creates enough self-sufficiency that they don't need the program in year 4.
and it would be
Which isn't
nice to
really
have a
happening.
3-year commitment or a 2-year, I mean, it would be nice to have a commitment from a.
3 years,
landlord.
again, thinking out loud, I think 3 years of asking a owner of a property to commit 3 years for an uncertainty for something they've never done.
Right.
Might be a disincentive.
Yeah.
Oh, at the
So,
beginning, I think.
I think we probably give them. The 10th, the deal, whatever the deal is, the 10,000 for 1 year. But then maybe it's an optional thing. Hey, if you do continue for the second year, we'll give you $5,000 type of thing. But that's all on them to make that decision. And then, hopefully the idea being that if you've done it for 2 years, you're more likely to keep it going, right?
It works for you.
Right.
Okay. So October 7th, we'll listen to the select board, what they have to say.
I think you can certainly participate in that meeting.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah, it's a workshop. It's gonna be a workshop
It is
type
gonna
of.
be a workshop meeting, okay. So we should all try to attend. Yeah.
Mhm.
You can post it as a trust meeting, just so we're covered in case there's a quorum. It's
My apologies, what, October 7th at what time?
5:30.
5:30 unless we move it earlier, but right now it's 5:30.
And then we'll put in a placeholder application for 580.
If you're comfortable with that, if you're not, then I mean, I know it's gonna be contentious at the CPC level too, because they've questioned why we've spent so much money on that building already, so.
Well, to get 1 unit for 500 and change, that's what Rich is saying roughly it's gonna be.
Yeah.
one unit in perpetuity for 500. That's kind of a going rate, right?
It is under the way, yes, and I don't disagree with Jackie that anything that involves our acquisition or development of properties as a town is going to cost, and it's gonna cost dearly, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And
Mhm.
it is unfortunate that some of the big ticket and the ones that will really move the needle in terms of our housing crisis through no fault of the town, are going to be deferred more than any of us want them to be. And it's unfortunate that you get beat up on Facebook because people don't understand that it's inextricably tied to wastewater and it takes time. And yes, we're not paying taxes on tea time, so
Right.
let's do it right. So that's one thing. But I do feel that given that, and given the fact that in order to make a real difference on the big stuff, it's gonna take longer than we thought. We really need to sort of broaden our ideas and, I haven't offered any, but I think we really need to think differently about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year term about what we can do to affect
Make some difference.
some change here other than, some of these the one-offs.
I totally agree, and that's why I think we're looking at lease to locals, buying deed restrictions. And then, we had talked, it was part of the community housing plan to incentivize, to assist people to purchase housing, right? And we just didn't have the ongoing funding for that. When the market got crazy, it was like, we thought, oh, we could give people 75,000 and that would help. Now 75,000 really isn't gonna help. So it's like, we didn't want to start a program like that without having a funding stream for it. And if wastewater's eating up all of our short-term rental tax money, then we don't have a funding stream unless, what Rich said to me yesterday, which makes perfect sense. I mean, if it's important to the community, then we need to ask the community. I'm making decisions saying maybe we can't afford this. And that's
Right.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous for us or for the select board to make those decisions. We can always just ask them, do you want a $500,000 override that we can give to lease for locals, buying deed restrictions, helping people buy homes?
The other
You
thing-
know,
The other thing that kind of gets lost in the shuffle is in Easton, we don't have one lot that is just strictly was bought and intended strictly for all housing.
mhm.
Other Brewster's doing stuff, but they had these lots, it's gonna be housing.
Right.
Everything that we're dealing with is tied up into other competing interests, T-Town, the town center. And also something like 580. Yes, it's $500,000 and we're gonna get one new unit. That's in line with what the numbers say, so we're good there, but part of the rationale for buying that was it's a historic building, it's a historic rehab, and it's a housing, and the COA nonprofit is there, and if that
And if you
went on
look
the
around-
private, they'd be out on the street, and then that important community service is gone, so there's no property that we're just like, boom, 100% housing, let's just figure out it's all tied up in these competing interests that we have to balance. And that's why this is so complicated, because CPA, yes, we're going because part of the funding is historic and some of it's housing, and it may be trust and it may not be. So it just, sometimes that gets lost, and especially when the conversation at CPA, why are we throwing so much money into this building? Well, it's the last historic building of its type, and that on its own had a certain draw for people that wanted to preserve it, and then you had, had in the housing, so it's very difficult to balance all these things and try to figure it out. And a lot of these other towns, Orleans, Brewster especially, they have these properties, we bought it and we bought it to do housing, and it's just how many, and we know that there's gonna be a trap. Either the sewer's already there, so no problem, or we know a package treatment plant's going in there and we built it into the budget, and it's like, just put it out to RFP and.
Governor Prince, right.
We don't have the luxury of. these
It's a nice
parcels.
model. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And,
great.
we talk about,
Mixed.
$500,000 for a bedroom at 580. I don't really look at it that way. I mean, I do in some sense, but I look at it. That's gonna be an awesome site. I mean, what a great project for the small town of East Hampton. I mean, it's a community resource, right? It's a community asset, that whole building in that corner. So, spend $1.5 million to rehab the building and get a couple extra units, and you got the historical facade and the.
Because we weren't gonna go, but he convinced us yesterday, literally yesterday.
Right. Are we
So
doing,
10, 20, 30 years from now, I'm gonna say, wow, this is an awesome place to go to support the COA,
Yeah.
get,
Yeah.
store.
I
And
go there all the
no one's
time.
gonna care that it costs us $2 million to get it and renovate it and put it, and keep it in good order, you know?
Are you going to CPC for historic for 580 this time?
No, I don't think so.
You don't need any more money.
We don't need any more money, because I think the reason we would do the third floor isn't gonna change the historic structure of the building. It's only, we want it for housing. Or for, you could use it for other things, but we
But-
want it for housing.
But you have the funding, if you weren't doing anything for housing in that building, I'm not saying do
Yeah.
that, I'm just saying, would you need to go to CPC this time? No, because you have all the funding already.
We didn't go last year for the whole package because they were unanswered questions about what's the affordability on the 2 units gonna be,
Right.
and is it qualified? So we-
Okay.
That's why we didn't just go.
So are you, I think I'm hearing, should we go ahead and do the housing at 580? What would be your take? Is a way to just move that forward?
Well, I mean, the ball's rolling down the hill. The CPC, I assume some of the funding for this has come from the historic bucket of the
It has.
CPC money, which has to be spent somewhere, and there's only so many historical projects that we could allocate that to.
Right.
All of it so far.
Right, we don't have a lot of other stuff in the pipeline, and as we just mentioned, the bigger stuff is gonna be pushed back, so. I mean, it's best player on the board right now, as far as I'm concerned, so, and there is, I mean, and. Yeah, it's not a purely mercenary thing, and it's not all just about beds, and we are a community, and the COA is very important, and that swap shop is part of the fabric of a lot of people's lives, so there's a lot of reasons to do it, but, at this juncture, I think pulling the plug would make no sense at all.
Right.
And
Okay.
if we're voting, I'd say, yeah, do it.
And what we thought about yesterday, the discussion that we had yesterday was. It's a very tiny, tight site. We have to kick the thrift shop out while we renovate. So we're gonna go through this huge thing of kicking them out, putting them in another place, moving them to another location, renovating, and then what, in 2 years, come back and do the third
Yeah,
floor, lift so that's where we said, this is not.
Do you have a place that you can move them?
Yes, we do. We're gonna move them to Town Center Plaza. To that beautiful big, it's gonna be actually nicer.
Yeah, they won't want to move back.
They won't wanna move back. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
But hope that building's not gonna last that much longer, so.
right, okay, all right. Do we need to make a motion? What I would suggest we make a motion to recommend an application to CPC to support the second and third units at 580 Massasoit. And
Just to be
price-
clear, so the net there'll be a second floor apartment and a third floor apartment,
Yeah,
is that right?
There
Okay.
is already, the
Right.
second floor is already ready to go.
But we can't rent it without the sprinkler system.
Sure, so it's
Okay,
not compliant, yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
okay.
all right.
So you're actually getting 2 units of housing, but we only have to truly renovate one.
Right.
We just have to add sprinklering and windows to the
Right.
other.
Well,
Right.
that's a good
Okay.
point.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries.
That's Jeff's question. Jeff, here in the market, so. You mentioned earlier about a buy down program. 50,000, 75,000 isn't really cutting it. So what's a magic number, do you think? I mean, if the average price, what's the average price of a reasonable house around
Right,
here?
so a
650?
a 21-year-old, 25-year-old Dave Fleming Oceanside Cape, which is a perfect single-family home, which we have hundreds of in East Hampton on a,
Yeah.
not on a walk to the beach lot, like when, for instance, it just traded on Edgewood, that wasn't, Pottery Barn, went for around 700. So what my experience in dealing with first-time buyers and recently, Brewster, that the qualification for 2 locals, and I just had this experience with a Brewster policeman and his wife who was an educator, and their snapping point was 550 for what they could qualify for at current market rates and what they could at a reason, the
Mortgage,
expected down
yeah.
payment and mortgage qualification. So to answer your question, if the market for a habitable 3-bedroom home that we wouldn't have to do $150,000 of subsidized work to, if you could, and I would imagine there would be some criteria for these things when you're buying them, just like there are for our rentals. Expect, for a ranch, certainly not less than 650. For little Kate, maybe 700. So to get from market to affordable, little a affordable, you're probably talking about 150 to 200 grand per
So-
house.
And even at, say 200 on a $700,000 purchase, that's
Right.
$500,000 mortgage that folks have to pay. So at that, to afford that, you're talking well above the.
We're not gonna have any.
Well, that's the problem.
So it's not
Then-
housing
well,
trust
that
funded
there's
program.
the catch-22 because unfortunately, you're outside the box on the guidelines.
But,
Right.
and I know people react to this badly.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But we're looking for year-round residents. We're looking for that fabric, that community fabric. So I get what you're saying. Is it worth paying if we limit it? We're not gonna do 50 of them a year,
Right.
but maybe we do 2 of them a year.
Well, maybe the funding comes from a different source.
Maybe we do
you know,
1 a year for the
right.
next 10 years,
Right,
get 10 of them.
well,
you
and
know?
I do believe, and I do think that there are benefits. I mean, if you drive through Brackett Landing, there's a lot of pride of ownership in there. You can't tell which ones are affordable. So, I think that given a horse in the race, people take good care of their homes.
Well, and that's part of the concept that I'm thinking
Right.
about as we talk about all these things is if the development cost of a unit in a high density development is 500, 600,000 per unit. And there's gonna be a lot of acrimony and NIMBYism about getting that.
Right.
A lot of gnashing of
Right.
teeth.
Right.
Maybe we're better off getting 2 or 3 units that exist in town already.
Amen. And
And that's
yes.
also the missing component. Like, I mean, we have towns around us, we're building some affordable housing. Clearly, we're gonna have a couple of hundred units within the
Right.
next couple of years.
and they may all be rentals, right?
Right, but we're not getting
Not all.
we're not advancing workforce housing at all. And that's who we want.
Right, right.
Right.
And there is something to be said, and I'm not a parent, but I would think there's something to be said for knowing that your kid's gonna have the same bus stop for 10 years, and then knowing that, I mean,
No
so
doubt.
if we're agreeing with each other, Rich, I'm with you. I think that, two or 3 times 150 to get people into a home that we don't have to manage.
Build or anything.
And they get into it with the understanding that this is gonna be our home, and if values double again in 10 years, we don't get the benefit of all of that doubling, then I think.
And if they sell the home within a certain period of time, that 200,000 comes back to us. to
Correct,
reinvest.
this is not we could just steal this model from someplace where it's been successful, it's been done plenty. I
Good
mean,
fight out.
right,
Yeah,
right,
this is
so,
100.
yeah, and I just think, and as good as the
I
work,
think it may have gone up.
right, and as good as we have management in place, but if you don't have to, if there's no ongoing cost associated with it, I feel like that's also, those resources can be spent on a better,
Well, I think the reason-
rental subsidy
And
program
trust
or
me, we
whatever,
don't
yeah.
wanna be, we really don't want to be in the rental management.
No,
business.
I-
We never did.
it's-
We
it's-
came in
it's
kicking and screaming.
It's expensive to be in the rental management.
I think the reason we didn't really follow through on the buy down program is because of, trying to get it to be income eligible under 100%
Right.
AMI.
A
So-
huge post.
So I think the answer is, again, people, the Facebook warriors that say how much we need housing. And that's a goal of the community, then do what you said earlier, you gotta make the ask.
And these
how
people
about
are
an,
gonna be
o-
paying taxes.
how about an
That's right
override?
too, Jackie,
A
that's
$500,000
right.
$1
No, that's right.
override, nobody likes the word override, but if you think we wanna do something, $500,000 a year for housing, that's not tied down to 100% AMI, would allow us to do a couple of these every year.
That would be great.
You would have my support. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd be happy to write the tax check for that.
Is there, I'm sure. Sorry, I'm trying to think and talk at the same time. The short-term rental tax that's going to wastewater.
Yeah.
Is there a chance of taking a small
No.
percentage of that to do this?
No,
Not with the costs we have. for
you know, as we're doing, you know, it's like shifting, I don't wanna say deck chairs on Titanic, that's terrible. But you know, you
We're
just,
the opposite of the Titanic.
you know, you just moving the buckets around.
Right,
You know, so,
but- But from a saleability perspective at town meeting, to say we're using short-term rental tax to do workforce housing.
and that just makes the ultimate passage of wastewater that much harder, because now we don't have that money to go to wastewater.
I respectfully, I think I disagree a little bit. The wastewater number is going to be so big. I don't know what it's gonna be.
Yeah, but I
It's gonna-
break it down, so, and it probably is gonna be different.
Can I finish?
oh, sorry.
Yeah. The wastewater number is going to be so large that if you decreased it by $500,000, so we could do 2 or 3 buy downs, wouldn't make any difference in the wastewater passing or not. And that would then give us the
I think-
buy down.
I think it does, and that's why I said I break it down, so I forget the numbers off. the top of
Right
my
now,
head.
we can subsidize 50%.
But if
wastewater.
the wastewater, it's not $150 million for wastewater that I'm thinking, I mean, I am, but like I said, I break that down. What's $150 million over 30 years on an interest-free
Yeah, well,
loan? Maybe that's $5 million a year, and we're gonna get a 25% subsidy from the Cape and Islands Trust, so we're down to less than 4 million a year. And I got $1 million, and I have $1.5 million of short-term rental, so now that's, you know, now what am I down to? Like 2.5 million.
Right,
And I'm gonna get some debt drop off that's gonna cover $1 million. So when we go and ask for wastewater for 150 million, all we're asking the taxpayers for is an extra $1 million per year, not 150 million.
okay.
So that's where the funding stream of the short-term rentals comes in. It's to fund the debt service. It's not to reduce the cost of 150 million by $1 million. It's,
And the urgency of wastewater is to chase that 0% interest.
Oh,
Loan
I'm on board.
forgiveness, yeah.
There's
I know, I'm just trying to explain, I totally get
Right,
the compelling argument for housing. And if there's a way we can do both, that's great. If you know, I wish we could, and maybe we just need to friggin' ask. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure anymore.
well, the other piece, and you know, it's hard to make the ask when there's a lot of people in town that have a lot of need, right?
Right.
So we've got a couple of things that, so it's.
Oh, the other thing
Doesn't-
we're gonna talk about on the seventh.
Doesn't particularly affect the housing trust per se, but it does in the sense of maybe you're thinking. As we haven't had mechanisms in place to support people that have affordability issues. But we just got passed recently, I'm sure you've heard about the community fund. And so I'm meeting with a couple of select board members to talk about what that's gonna look like. So the community fund is, we've been authorized by special legislation to give up to $2,000 a year to residents. I forget what the law actually says. It says hardship or if I need hardship.
You're taking the 200,000 off their tax. Like their
No,
value?
no.
Okay, sorry,
We
sorry.
can give them,
You lost me.
we can give them up to $2,000
Oh,
for
2,000,
hardship.
yeah,
They-
okay.
They demonstrate hardship.
so like a grant.
But the beauty of it is we get to
Yes.
determine all the rules. So that's what I mean with the select board. So who would be eligible to get $2,000 from the community fund? But this came in fruition because of a discussion about the residential tax exemption. Whereas if you've had potentially could shift $500 from a resident to a non-resident, which causes a lot of acrimony, is this divisive. To give a resident a $500 benefit. Every resident, whether they need it or not.
It's gonna take.
So the community fund was, well, instead of just doing that and causing all this division within the community between residents and non-residents. And giving money to people that might not need it anyway. Why don't we get special legislation, have this community fund, and it allows us to give up to $2,000. For those that we say need it. And so it's targeted. So that's another thing that's gonna be coming. So, when we go and ask for a $500,000 override for housing. The first thing you hear, well, I can't afford my taxes as it is. Well, then you should apply for our community fund and we can give you up to $2,000.
Or the other thing we're gonna talk about is the affordable housing tax exemption. So if you rent
That's for,
if you live in it or you rent it to a person who meets the income criteria, you get a tax break too. And how much is that one? Is that
That could be-
discretionary too?
Yeah, that's the thing. But that's for
So
land.
those things cost money because we have to make room for them in the budget. We have to make room for the reduction in revenue in the budget, but they're easier to work around usually.
But my point is, you know, we have mechanisms with this community fund to provide support that those that are worried about rising taxes. So that would be a reason not to vote for a housing override, because you might believe in housing, but I can't afford more taxes. Well, okay, you can't, but we'll give you $1,000 or $2,000.
Well, take some of the argument away if you're truly needy. If you're not needy, you just don't want to pay more taxes, which are most of us. You know,
Right. It was interesting at Windmill Weekend that we were kind of tracking people who stopped and talked at our table that were sort of opposed to more housing.
oh,
Okay, not a lot, but maybe four, 5, 10 at the most. We were busy nonstop from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and then people stop constantly. But we also had a fair number of people who stopped who were part-time people. And almost invariably, they would, because I would always ask somebody, so where do you live? Do you live here full time? Thinking, we send them up to get them to support housing and things in Eastham. And if they said, no, they were only here part-time, and almost inevitably they would say, and we know you don't like part-time people.
Yeah, that was.
A very constant statement. And so there clearly is, and that's 60% of the housing units now. So, or I don't know what the most recent number is.
55%.
but I think what the problem is by saying that we want our community to be robust with enough year-round residents and families and children to make it a community.
Right,
We're offending the people who are here part-time. That, I don't feel that way, but they do. They're
No,
like,
I
so
mean,
we want year-round people, but you don't want us.
and we all sitting
Yeah.
there kept saying, well, no, we like the part-time people. You're
Yes.
part of the fabric of the community, part of what makes the economy work. Try to disabuse them of that, but there's clearly a very, very strong schism now. At least based on what we saw.
And
between us
they have mobilized that schism because of the discussions about the residential
Right.
taxes.
Right. It was striking. to
Yeah.
me, because I hadn't had that same reaction in prior Windmill Weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely a different year.
I know,
Yes.
I felt it, we felt it as the board has discussed the.
Right.
tax.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because the fact of the matter is that people have been coming here for centuries to get away from the world, and the folks who are generally, screeching the loudest about and no one likes to see someone going 55 on Bridge Road. I mean, running
Right,
over
right.
turtles and stuff, especially me. But I appreciate the non-resident taxpayers immensely because they're the ones that don't have kids in the school system
Right.
and only use the fire services, 8 months or 6 months or 4 months a year. They're subsidizing our taxes. I mean, the reason we don't have New Jersey taxes is because we have a giant subsidy to our tax base
Yes.
from these people that don't live here. Everybody knows that, but it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a source of resentment.
It shouldn't. You're right. So we're gonna run out of time. October 7th, the joint meeting. We'll be there. We'll help with the discussion.
Sorry, do you want to have it as a joint meeting or just simply, I was just gonna post it just in case as a quorum and
Post
discuss
it, and I'll talk to, when we do our agenda setting, I'll talk to Amy and Jerry. I'm sure they won't have a problem with it. I'm sure they'd love
We'll
to.
post it and then however,
However, but we'll be there to
Yeah.
participate. We'll do a request to CPC for 580. Okay. I think those are the two takeaways at the moment.
Definite takeaways, right?
Definite, we have to take action now.
580 for CPA. We know we need CPA money. We don't know if it should be from the trust or the town.
You mean
Right.
asking them
Is it
for
gonna be,
housing
is it
money?
gonna be big A or little A?
Yeah, I mean, we put in a placeholder either way, it's just. a matter of
Oh, I
decision.
think I think for,
580.
580, it should be big A.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could make a request to the capital projects committee that's not from the trust, right? We can say we want, but it's still the same pot of money.
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
If you want it big A, which I think would be good, given the nature of the building and the, I don't know, it just feels like that's what people are expecting it to be. Maybe. Then do you want the money to come from the trust? And if you do, I would go to CPC this year to ask for that money, to put in a specific request.
Yeah.
Or do you want it out of general capital funds, which gives you the ability to wait to decide if you want a big A or little A? Because then it's not trust money.
What's general capital? All the CPA
see,
money is,
I'm just
Oh,
saying, if we're gonna use the CPA, the use of the CPA money,
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily have, it's going towards like the construction. So it
Right.
doesn't necessarily have to be the trust. I mean, it's kind of like
If it's
adding,
not the trust, who would it be?
Making the request.
Oh, the
Town
town
can
made
make
it,
the
I see, the
request.
town, yeah, sorry, I didn't process
I
that.
just,
Yes.
it just, to me, it's just simplifying,
Yes, okay, you guys do.
putting it into the trust adds another layer with, we know exactly this is going into.
Limits.
Yes, yeah, I'm following, yes. So it's going to be a CPA request or CPC request, but it's gonna come from the town. And then you can decide big A or little A,
But it's good that we have the recommendation that
that we would
trust
support.
supports.
Okay, we support it. Okay. Jackie, I think I remembered the last time we talked. Or I forget. I think it was, anyway. We talked about doing a meeting at the library about housing in the fall.
Mhm.
Do you know any more about that or anything we can do to help?
we
Yes, so
talked about it because we were gonna ask the state person who was at this great conference that Rachel went to.
we went to Mass Housing Partnership did a conference back in June. And they provide trainings to municipalities. So I had spoken to Laura Schubelt there
Mhm.
and we're looking to find a time that would work. To do a community-wide informational session on housing.
Because I think it really helps to do a little bit of education.
Yeah.
Especially around, if we put state money into something, what does that mean about the selection and all of that stuff? Because people always get mad inevitably. As many
Yeah.
times as we explain it, the selection process, they get angry at it. So I think that coupled with, and what else are we doing? Like, especially if we have a new program that's possible to implement this year, like lease to locals, that would be a good time to do it. So
Right.
I don't know, like early November is,
Yeah, I think we've got to find the time. It's, finding a time the library is available too. It's about
okay.
turkey, so.
We'll get Laura,
And,
and
yeah.
whenever Laura can come, then we'll work
Yeah,
around that.
and she didn't have a lot of openings either, so.
Okay.
Because I agree with you that I think anytime we can bring people together to talk in a positive way and educate people about housing, it gets us forward towards the time we're gonna be having big housing discussions relating to Northeast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just one other, because we're thinking about our work plan, and that relates to staff. The South Sunken Meadow, the piece of property that could be a public-private partnership that could have a number of units on it.
The little
a little
triangle.
triangle piece.
Yeah.
Sandy Meadow, though.
Yeah, yeah. I got you.
I mean, Sandy Meadow, I keep saying Sunken Meadow.
Yeah.
How do we move that forward? Is there anything we can do to help? Is there a consultant we need to hire to do the open space, natural habitat issue? So we can start to move, because that's, as Jeff is saying, looking for opportunities to start to
Yeah.
show.
And that
we're
would be a
making
good
progress.
home ownership opportunity too.
Absolutely.
The last time we discussed it, they were adamant that it was a habitat travel spot. That habitat it's a connecting corridor for habitat and
But it's only it's only, if I remember, when we looked at it, it's only across the very top of it and would leave a lot of space available. And we've met.
Who's they? Do we have a wildlife study or do we, or
that
does?
was the open space and they had just done there was something that
A
they.
heritage
quoted.
wildlife study.
Yeah,
I think
so.
so.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but do we need to verify that that piece is available for housing? I thought that there was a question about that when they did Sandy Meadow. that
It's not
was-
designated as anything.
I
This
remember-
is the argument that I have with them, okay? That we bought the parcel for specific uses, right? So there are open space things on it, there are housing things on it. It doesn't say that that little triangle should be open space or housing, it just is available.
right.
Okay,
And it's the logical place to put housing unless you wanted to put it on the front right on Route 6, which would be another logical place to put housing.
Or both,
Or both.
or both.
Oh, is that property big enough for what Habitat for Humanity would be looking at?
Be a good habitat.
It
what's
would be
the
a very
acreage,
good-
Paul? Do we know off the top of our head?
I think it's
3 acres?
3 or
three,
4.
2, yeah, 4 at the most, but I think. it's
Yeah,
like
3
2.5,
something.
3
Oh,
acres.
yeah.
And it's a strange
Right,
shape,
well, that's
but,
okay.
but it's right adjacent to the driveway.
It's a
for
great
the
spot.
Sandy
It's a
Meadow.
great
So I
spot.
mean, you could subdivide it into 2 lots, get 2 units, what you could also do a unit and ADU on each one.
You could,
Right.
at least 4.
Right.
I'm just depending if I'm just saying like worst case, if there's 2.5 acres just to get
We
it.
talked about it, it would be great to get like Habitat or somebody else to do it for us, you know?
Yeah.
So could we get 3, right, so I'm sorry, Paul, did you say it's under 3? You think it's under 3 acres?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
But almost close, right?
Yeah, it's close
Yeah.
to 3.
I think it'd be a good 2 principal units and an ADU for each one.
right,
Be
At a minimum.
at a minimum, and then that's would fit in with the, I mean, it's a single family home neighborhood, so that would be fitting in with that.
And
Habitat is, they've been waiting to do something in Eastham for
I
like
know.
years now. We keep meeting with them. They like want to do something in Eastham.
Yeah, they don't do it the way they used to, these one-offs, they want
Right.
bigger parcel now.
and so.
Oh, so they
only-
want multiple units.
Yeah.
And the only
Oh,
issue with
interesting.
Habitat, last time we talked to them, they can't quite
Yeah.
make the ADU. The ADU thing doesn't work for their model.
Right.
Maybe that was a couple years ago last time we talked. It's just the way
And
they,
they were
Well,
working
could
on.
we smush 3 units on or?
we could, but also
Two
maybe with what we're
duplexes.
gonna do with ADU. it might involve
2 duplexes and 2 ADUs.
Yeah.
Do that way too.
so that's intriguing, and if that would be worth giving up the land for to someone like, and I noticed that, Cape Associates is doing the former Masonic Lodge in Orleans, and Matt, and who was a great citizen, I mean, the conversation Susan and I had with him, they're not going anywhere, and if however it shakes out, whether it's ownership, year-round rentals or something, I mean, that would be worthy of exploration, and it may not be a big hit to the town.
And that's what we were
financially.
thinking of for Beachcomb. Is there any way that we could get, any business to partner to help us build that and keep half of the units for their workforce or something along that?
That's good thinking,
Because if we're just looking for year-round rentals.
right, we don't care who runs them or who,
Right,
right,
yeah.
right.
Well, we're looking for year-round rentals, but we are also looking for home ownership.
Right,
We need
and,
both.
right,
We
and,
need both.
and
And
we-
we're gonna get a big chunk of rentals.
right,
But I think
Right.
with the
Big
Habitat
condo
model.
across the
for the
street.
well,
affordable-
you could gain, yeah, I'm sorry,
With the Habitat model for affordable housing, and then if we're doing a down payment program for people of a higher income, that will help them get into home ownership. Or, other.
well, it would certainly be worth gaming it out on that piece on South Sunken and see what's the max that we could achieve, what would the highest and best use be, whether it's condoing ADUs for rent that are allowed to be rented separately, or giving them the land and, you know, letting them do their thing and put some sort of a deed restricted rental. I mean, it's worthy of a conversation for sure.
Right, and,
And we already own the land, so.
right, it's just sitting there.
Paul made a very good point about, you know, we don't. It's pretty hard to go out and pay retail for stuff and not have people screaming about what it costs, because between that and, you know, prevailing wage work that has to happen. You know, and you're paying painters $70 an hour, the numbers
Yeah.
are staggering, and, you know, even those of us that want. That kind of housing, it. When you look at the, you know, when you look at the ask, it's very expensive, so. That's one piece that we could do something with, that wouldn't be a croaker financially,
Yeah.
maybe.
And that's what I say to the people who scream about, you know, why aren't we doing housing? It's like, okay, if we were spending our own money, I could go to town meeting and ask you for $56 million to do 100 units of housing, but since we have to use other people's money, it's gonna take us a time.
Can you talk to Habitat
Oh, yeah.
and, get,
We could just say,
we've
if
got,
this property was available, what would Habitat do? What would
Right.
what would you do?
Plan
How
for
could
it.
you get the most bang for the buck? Oh, when we had a joint open space committee and trust committee meeting, open space is looking to partner with us to do this, that piece of property. They want it as a joint project. So
Oh, I
we
didn't
won't have
understand.
resisted.
Okay.
We won't have, I mean, maybe, but you know, time has passed, but
Yeah.
what we're, in theory, we don't have resistance about that. And because they see that as a really good joint project, and they're looking for those kinds of projects.
Okay.
So I think first talk to Habitat, but then if that doesn't seem like that's gonna go down the road, I think we start to work on an RFP for somebody, a private developer who we could deed the land to and would build what we want. And then it's theirs to own and operate and run. We don't have to maintain it. We don't have to.
Well, then you guys need to start thinking about what you want, because what would that RFP be? That's what we'd have to.
Right. And if,
Because honestly, we've got to, if we're gonna really move forward on a couple of these, they're gonna take all the staff bandwidth that we have.
yeah,
And
and
we can, I guess we spent some of our money to hire a consultant to do it.
You can do that, but you don't need a consultant. You guys need to just sit and have a meeting about
right,
if you had a 3-acre parcel of land,
right,
what would you want on it?
Right.
Shayna, we can write the specification,
Oh, that's what I thought you
but we can't make those
Oh,
decisions
no,
for
we
you.
could do that.
no, but what we can do is we can have the conversation with Matt and say, look, if we're putting up the land.
Exactly.
What is the, as the good citizens that you are, what is the least margin that you could work for, and what does that add up to per unit, and can we sell them to people that qualify when you're done? And that's an easy conversation to have. Matt's
Or-
very good at bidding work, I mean,
And it could be a combination. Maybe they keep one market rate. I mean, that model does work.
Yes.
It lowers the amount of homes, but it does work, I think.
right,
It doesn't have to lower the number of,
And
we
make it-
need market rate homes. We need workforce homes.
Yes.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
No, you're right.
Nothing wrong at all with that, even.
But
if
I
it's
think even if
50-50.
if that helped the developer make a little bit of the margin up that
Right.
way. by
Because
being able to-
that land, I think that land wasn't purchased with trust money, right? So we're not little a, big A constrained there. So if we get
I'm
two,
gonna look at did we get it? Was it given to us or did we buy it? I'm not sure. That was way before my time.
I guess that would be helpful, you know, if you and.
we'll do that, we'll
Yeah.
have
I
the
mean,
thought.
If you
Sure.
meet with, I mean, I think even if you meet with Habitat and with that whole, and just get these
Yeah.
different
Right,
ideas, then you'll be informed, we can come back, have this
Yeah.
discussion,
We can talk to
formulate a recommendation. And then we can go to the select board and
Right.
say, this is a recommendation for that piece of property.
They would love it. They would
We
love
can do
it.
this.
and it's
I
a
mean,
much,
we would have to do an RFP. No matter what direction we go in, just to bid it out, but if we know the ballpark and the reality of what Habitat would do with it and what someone like Cape Associates or someone else would do with it, that informs
And,
Right.
and we can give you the RFP for Nauset Green, because Paul and I wrote that. So that would, I think it's the land lease, there's just, certain aspects of it that,
And one of the things that I remember from when we talked with Matt. One of the things that makes a big difference on what he can do is whether or not. He's doing it. And therefore, he doesn't have to do the same. Davis-Bacon wage stuff that
Right.
you do. So the model, to get the model right,
that's the 99-year lease.
right, is that what that
Yep.
is? Okay.
So when they get the 99-year land lease, then they can get financing and they can do the construction on their own and.
Yeah.
And we can contribute money, but it's a separate private financing package.
Right.
We don't wanna do the construction.
No,
We don't want to have any part of that.
No, but we wouldn't need to, I don't think.
No.
And I have no idea how Habitat works, but it's, it's whatever we can, whatever's best, whatever's best.
So,
I'm happy to chase down the private piece of it would.
Yeah.
and if the
Sure.
private piece makes more sense than the Habitat piece, then we go with the private piece.
That property's just been kind of sitting there under the radar. I think if we have the research and then a recommendation to bring forth, that
And-
is really what it needs, just to make a decision.
No, and it's an affordable thing that we don't have to have, it's not a big ask and it's demonstrable effort to do something while the other stuff is incubating, which is gonna take a while, I mean.
Talking about Beach Plum too,
Right,
while
right,
they're.
right, hey, but yeah, while you're at it, you guys slow.
Yeah, I
You
look at
guys slow.
each one, I don't know, like, that's the same idea, like, they just did a very similar project in Chap. Right, right off, right near downtown, where they built an apartment building behind one of their offices. And to me, that's like the model for Beach Plum. It's a similar size site and
Yeah.
similar to what we're talking about. So it's like,
Yeah.
is he in the market to replicate that and would it work
Right,
mutually?
yeah, so there's definitely,
So-
and maybe there are goodies available to them tax wise too, that we're not, that might,
we don't know.
Aware of,
again,
yeah.
it's, if you can.
So why
Okay.
don't you talk to Matt?
Okay.
Can we get where would we get a plot of
You
the
know, site plan and all
site
that,
plan,
yeah.
of what's there?
I can give you everything we have on.
Okay, and where the trail is?
Yeah, and then we
Water
might
protect.
have to resurvey just that one little piece, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Cause I think we have one plot plan, or maybe it's two, maybe it's the housing complex and then the rest is Sandy Meadow, but.
And you mentioned, and we had talked about this in the joint open space committee meeting, the strip along Route 6. Should that be part of this discussion also? Because if he could get two pieces planned instead of one,
Is there a piece on Route 6 that is not part of Sandy Meadows that's deeded separately or,
No,
No, but
it's all.
but you
part of
could lop
Sandy
it off
Meadow.
or,
you could, there's like a little panhandle kind of tongue piece.
And it's
of-
not-
it's-
It's not a Sandy Meadow, it's a woods,
okay,
that
so it's
part
not,
is-
so,
and it
okay.
has a deeded access right out to Route 6, so you can make a little subdivision
panhandle.
there. Pretty
Sound of
easily.
that, okay,
And it wouldn't affect Sandy Meadow
right.
at all.
and the open space committee was
Sandy
willing to
Meadow,
consider that.
Those people don't have much to gripe about. They have a freaking nice setup there. I mean,
Everybody in
yeah.
And what some of those houses are, the Sandy Meadow houses are affordable houses.
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Already,
But they were, yeah, there was a lot of land allocated to not a lot of units.
Right.
Yes.
in the past,
We could have, I wouldn't mind a do-over on that one, but.
yeah, okay, so you can get us the materials, the plot plan and,
Yeah, whatever we have on background for that, and
Okay.
then I can give you a copy of the RFP for Nelson Green.
okay, and who's the contact at Habitat?
Beth, wait,
Okay,
Oh, love Beth. She's awesome.
okay,
She's also very savvy real estate person.
yeah,
she is,
Okay. That's good.
because the Route 6 part, that little piece, again, Jackie, the open space committee, when we met and taught, they're like, that makes good sense, as a joint project, that makes good sense.
Absolutely.
And we could do, if they want to, we can do the conservation restriction for the Sandy Meadow piece, which I don't think we've ever done.
Yeah, at minus those two pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what they're always telling me. They're always telling me the whole piece
Right,
is in conservation, and that's not
Right.
legally true.
okay,
The recreation area is beautiful and great and everything, but if you squeeze something out of both ends, that doesn't affect and I love my animals, but I think that wouldn't undermine the habitat value there very much at all.
I don't think so either.
it looked like when we looked at it, because we actually had the diagram that we were looking at. The animal trail is, if you can measure it, sort of a triangle, is right in the top. You could just lock that off and put that as part of the conservation
Absolutely.
restriction
Yeah.
and.
Yeah.
Or in whatever deed we do that says you can't build within 50 feet of whatever. And it would leave plenty of room.
Right, and so no impervious fencing or anything like that, like they have to be able, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Doable.
Okay, that's exciting. Okay, we are well past our time.
Okay, I gotta go.
Yeah, I know everybody has to, but I have to go too. Is there anything else we have to talk about today? Oh, no, okay.
Sorry.
No,
So
this
this
is
is
what we
really
thought.
good.
That was
This is what we
productive. No,
thought.
that was-
This is what we thought.
Glad you were here.
I'd like to do this
Yeah.
more often.
We'd like it too.
Okay, good.
Because you have a lot of good times.
It helps us, and it also helps you guys, like, connect the dots.
Yeah,
you
and the
know?
reality checks are good too. I mean,
What
I have
dots?
these ideas and then Rich is like, well, here's what's happening in the real world, and I don't,
But that's the idea we had.
right.
It was a pre-COVID idea that we had that we just then we were like, oh, demoralized,
Right.
A motion to adjourn? Adjourn, okay, all in favor, aye. Aye, thank you. Okay, we're done.
Thank you.
All right,
Do we have any ideas? Anybody? Repeat Karen's.
no, we need to try and find a replacement,
A good one.
a really strong one,
Hardworking.
like
You know?
you guys.
Yes.
And someone who
I work
Knowing-
in notebooks.